teacher standpoint, what are the expectations for this specific math enrichment lab class?
Every student has to have the opportunity to ask a question. Every student has the opportunity to explain their thinking. I'm not having the students remember my math. I'm having them formulate their own and then remember, because they're more likely to remember what they know how to do than what I'm trying to teach them how to do. So if a student has a different definition that they're comfortable with, that allows them to continue to be successful at whatever topic we're studying, then I let them use that. I don't try to correct them. I don't try to direct them towards my definitions. I try to direct them towards the ones they're going to remember versus mine, because they can remember what they know, not what I know, and they're more comfortable with that. Most teachers try to say, this is how the book does it, this is how I do it. They don't remember me, they remember them. So that's an expectation.
Okay. In terms of the math enrichment class, I know it's a preparation for the 10th grade MCAS, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What were the specific guidelines provided to you in terms of following a particular lesson planning?
So during some of the common planning time, we've sat down with the regular education teachers and asked them what topics they felt the kids needed more work on. So for the first 2 months of school, I have taught what the regular ed teachers have asked them to teach. And then I've looked at the curriculum from the state standards, and they highlight which topics will be on the MCAS. So while I'm not trying to teach to the MCAS, I am trying to teach the concepts that will be found on the MCAS. So I've started out with algebra, and we'll finish up with geometry. Because right now the kids are learning geometry. So to start with geometry and to teach them the same kind of math that the geometry teachers are teaching them in the 10th grade, I think would be counterproductive. They might like my way better than the teacher's way, and I don't want to create that kind of animosity between, you know, them having to choose which teacher presents the material to them the best way that they can understand it. So I go back to the algebra, which they've already had, and by the time we get into February of next year, then I'll start teaching them the math that they've already seen this year in the geometry course.
Okay. Now, in terms of your, I know this is a 40-45 minute class. Can you explain to me the format of your class? You know, kids come in.
So when you walk in, you sit down, you take out your notebook, your homework, your questions, and you're prepared to go to work. There's a problem on the board. It may review the previous day's lesson. It may introduce the next lesson. It may review something that was done weeks ago, because I've been trained to spiral the work. You don't want to give it in September for them never to see it again until this test. So we'll spiral work back. If a particular concept has a very nice lead-in, for example, I'll be teaching the kids how to do solving absolute value inequalities. So a wonderful lead-in would be to have them solve an inequality, and then that would lead in to being able to solve an absolute value inequality. So it'll just be a natural progression for them. After the opener, which is about 5 minutes, because anything more than that becomes the lesson. And with our students, some of them need a lot of background information, but if you do that, then the opener becomes the lesson and you never get to what you planned. And because we have a limited number of days, we don't have the luxury of being able to carry anything over. For example, my B-Week students, in the next 8 weeks, starting last Saturday, I will only see them 9 times in 2 months. So that's very difficult, assuming there are no snow days. So you really have to literally plan out each day, each lesson, each part of the lesson. So 5 minutes at most, and that limits you to 1, possibly 2 problems, even though it seems like you're not spending enough time on any particular problem. You move into the lesson. I like to use an outline where you use capital letters to introduce major topics, numbers to introduce examples, and then lowercase letters to introduce support for those examples that we go over. Examples involve the teacher and the student interacting and having discussions back and forth. Then we go to practice, in which you allow the students a chance to sit down and work out a problem in what Putnam calls progressive struggle. In other words, you as the teacher back off and allow the children the opportunity to sit down and work it out on their own without getting immediate intervention from the teacher. What we're trying to do is to build up enough stamina so that when they're not with you, they can sit down and work out a problem and know that if they put time and effort, they'll be able to succeed. So we literally, as teachers, back away and then give them the 10 to 15 minutes to really work out a problem. And then, of course, I'm a big proponent of writing in mathematics, whereas I'd like to have the students to be able to not only explain how to solve a problem, but put it down in words. So I will be introducing my journals in the second semester into the classroom so that my students who are excellent writers, who tend to like English more than math, will be given the opportunity to do what they like in the class they may not like so much, which is writing.
Okay. So in this particular, with the lesson that I observed, I know we were talking about, you know, you had introduced variables the previous class. The warm-up was solving for a variable, and our lesson was actually going into substituting your final answer to the variable to see if the equation.
Right, checking if because algebra guarantees you a number, it doesn't guarantee you an answer. So when the students solve the problem and get the value of the variable, it may not be the answer. So the check is a very important part now based upon discussions this past summer about the new testing. It's not so much can they do the algebra, but can they explain what the answer really means.
Gotcha.
So, and that of course comes from the college preparatory classes, where it's not so much what the answer is, but what does it really mean. You have to get back to the problem, the question that's being asked, and the students must explain what that number represents when it comes to the question that they've been asked to answer.
Okay. During our lesson, what do you think, was there anything that caught you off guard? Anything you felt like when you prepared the lesson, you had this in mind and all of a sudden?
Well, I tell you, I got the sense I was being watched, like videotaped, and it's like my spider sense was going off, and you know, nobody likes to be watched or stared at, and you know, being from the big city, I should be used to it, but that kind of got me a little bit.
Okay, that threw you off a little bit. In terms of in terms of expectations for the kids, do you feel the kids followed the lesson plan? They were on pace. It was a good, clear understanding of what the concept was.
What I saw was that every kid was actively engaged in the learning process, had a notebook, no cell phones to distract them, no earbuds to distract them. At any moment I could call on a kid, and with a little prodding from me, they would have been able to attempt to answer the question, because they know that no judgment is passed on them whether they understand it or not. I just ask the kids to try. It's about trying. Success comes later. After you try enough, then eventually success comes. But our students, what I've noticed prior to, not particularly this lesson, but what I've noticed about students that I get after they've had other teachers, is that they have to have the answer correct immediately. And for a lot of our students, that prevents them from even attempting. It won't hurt if you don't try. But I've been able to coax them into trying. Sometimes it takes a little bit more prodding, but eventually even my students who refuse now will attempt.
No, and that's one thing that I clearly notice. When you ask for volunteers, they're all willing to go up there. Regardless if they knew what they were doing, they wanted to go up there and they felt comfortable going up there. And that is definitely something that I see as a strength, because you know, in order to succeed, you have to fail, but you have to be willing to fail to succeed. And
well, usually at the beginning of the week, I give them $20 each to, you know, just so it works.
You do a phenomenal job there. In terms of checking for understanding, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but there were a couple times you asked the class when you were checking for understandings, and you asked for okays, do you understand? And what I heard is a lot of times the kids say, yes, yes, and it was very high volume, everyone will say. But then there was a couple times that you asked, does everyone understand it? And I quite didn't hear that okay coming from everyone. Did you notice that also?
So yes, so one of the things I'd like to do is I like to do my year in stages. So for the first term, I like to let them get comfortable. And then when we switch over to the second term, I go from paired seating to cooperative learning in groups of 4. And by building up enough confidence, as much as we'd like them to be able to be called upon and answer immediately and go to the board and write down their solutions immediately and help other students, a lot of our children just are not comfortable with that. So I ease them into it. So one of the things I'll ease into is that I will check for understanding on individual students. I will literally walk around and with my little rubber stamp their book to show them that good job. It allows me to walk around and see how each kid is doing. Another thing that I will do term 2 is I will call on an individual student and say, do you understand? And if I literally have to call on every single student, I will do that. Because that gives me then an opportunity to communicate with each student and say, it's okay not to know. It's okay not to understand. It's not okay not to ask. So with the journal writing, I'm going to give students an opportunity to ask their questions through writing it down and then presenting it to me for me to read, versus just putting them out there. The first couple of months, they're afraid. The next couple of months, they're comfortable, they're used to me, I'm used to them, they know what my expectations are, they know that it's okay to make mistakes. When we get into the third semester, then we're going to do a lot of handwriting, little mini quizzes where literally it's a problem and then a problem that they do and show. I have these whiteboards that I'll have each kid hold up and say, okay, I've done it. And then of course the child who doesn't hold it up, that allows me not to have to go and check on every student, it allows me to go and check on the few individuals. So I tend to do my lessons and my developing of how to assess how they're doing on a daily basis through sections. First term I do it one way, second term a second way, third term another way. And then at the end of the year, who's ever still with me, I basically get them to do the work and teach the lesson and run it.
Okay.
So
we're early on in the year, you're still
early on in the year, I
first term
basically
process.
ask the students as a group how we're doing.
Okay.
Then based upon homeworks, based upon assessments, then I know which students I should, call on a little bit more. Second semester, I tend to walk around and look at every student, and instead of just peering and looking and seeing, you give them a little stamp. And then you can trade in the stamps for no homework during Christmas, no homework during February vacation. An extra 5 points on a problem, because honestly, if you're getting 83 and you're a B student, getting an 88 still keeps you as a B student, but they see that 5 points as a big deal. Third semester, I basically have the students use either their journals or go to the boards more often, so instead of asking an entire group, hey, does everybody understand? I'm able to now break it down into those students who I know don't, but are afraid to admit it. So then I give them other avenues, which is either writing it down in their journal, handing it in on a whiteboard. If I have a student who refuses to go to the board, and I know that they need to do this because it'll help them better understand what they're doing, I'll have them write it down on the paper and then I'll put it on the board.
Okay.
Or I'll have them put it down on an overhead and then put it up there, because they'll write it at their seat, but they will not go up and show it. So you start out as a whole and then you break it down into the individuals. And then when you know you have students who can help other students, that's another way to see how the kids are learning it. It doesn't always have to be the teacher checking every student for every problem. It could be the students helping other students. So I could pair students together and let them help. That gets more students getting helped. Because in a group of 26, and in 42 minutes, which it can be 42 minutes, but the reality is it's 35 minutes, because I don't make them run down the hallway. I'm in between classes should be a little them time. As much as teach bell to bell, which I do, when they walk into my room, I'm not hounding them immediately. Come in, sit down, take out your notebook, your homework, have your list of questions from your journal, let's go to work. But I'm a big proponent of time. I mean, I'm not willing to give up any of it.
And I did notice that, like I said, when the kids did get in the classroom, they were ready to work, and that was really eye-catching.
And what was funny, it was first period.
Which is,
And
yes.
being a hallway monitor, I noticed a lot of kids not getting in first period. So either they're doing it for me or they're doing it because they have to. But either way, I'm getting those kids in ready to go when the bell rings.
No, the other thing, in terms of like language development, what are you doing for the ELL students in your class to kind of the key vocabulary needed for the success moving forward?
So what I've learned in the last year through professional development here from the Springfield Public School System is that we as teachers have always tried to simplify the vocabulary and the explanations to the children. But someone brought up a wonderful point during our professional development in August, which was, if you can soften the material as you present it to the children.